Welcome to the Adyen Account Data Compromise Survival Guide. As a global acquirer, we have visibility and insights from responding to ADCs. The goal of today's presentation is to define what an ADC event is, the most common goals of malicious actors. Following this, we go through the process from receiving the notification to containment, the relationship with the PFI, and response and recovery from an ADC. Throughout this process, we elaborate on major challenges for merchants and evaluate what areas of PCI DSS were neglected. For instance, scoping or lack of attention to cardholder data. We hope to educate, inform, and guide stakeholders. So what is an account data compromise? An account data compromise, otherwise known as an ADC, occurs when account data is obtained by an unauthorized person who intends to commit fraud of any sort. To avoid any confusion, let us remind you of what is meant with account data. Account data consists of cardholder data and sensitive authentication data. Cardholder data may appear in the form of a full PAN plus any of the following: cardholder name, expiration date, and/or service code. Sensitive authentication data includes full track data, card verification code, PINs, and PIN blocks. An ADC event may be caused by a breach of the merchant's payment system by a malicious actor. When an ADC occurs, it is important to act quickly in order to identify the root cause, contain the breach, limit reputational damage and financial losses, and most importantly, protect account data. We consider an account data compromise to be a high-risk event. Here are some of the risks to consider. The security risk. An ADC event poses significant security risk. Depending upon the root cause of the compromise, the attacker may have gained privileged access to the merchant's application and/or systems. Such level of access opens many doors for the attacker to stay hidden, persistent, and continue abusing the system for a long period of time. This comes with additional risk that if the merchant cannot completely eradicate the attack and gets multiple ADC events in a short time, they run the risk of payments being blocked by the payment processor or even by the schemes. The financial risk. An ADC event can be costly for merchants as they have to pay scheme fines, the cost of the PFI, and potentially engage a QSA to revalidate their PCI DSS. In some cases, it can even lead to bankruptcy. The reputational risk. An ADC event may lead to negative publicity or even brand damage among shoppers. And lastly, the legal risk. An ADC event can also be subject to regional or domestic regulation, such as the GDPR. Even though the legal risk might be out of scope for PCI DSS, it is still important to consider. An ADC event has a lot of potential risk and is a very unpleasant experience for the merchant, as such an event can have a negative impact on a business of any size. The number of ADC events varies from year to year, but it only takes one single event to impact a large number of cardholders and negatively affect an organization's security posture. So what are some of the common goals of malicious actors? So an ADC event occurs due to the actions of a malicious actor. A few of the common goals of malicious actors are the following. Firstly, monetary gain. So for the use of selling credit cards or personally identifiable information on the black market. Revenge, to harm reputation and the business. Competitive advantage, greedy competitors looking to get ahead in the industry. And using stolen cards to finance illegal activities. Ultimately, the goal of malicious actors will always be harmful to the merchant, the cardholders, and any other players it may impact along the way. Due to the COVID pandemic, malicious actors have been further evolving their attacks for achieving such goals and exploiting the situation in which most employees have been working from home. This has further reinforced the importance of PCI DSS in trying to prevent and limit such attacks. The stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders who play a part in the event of an ADC? Protecting the payment ecosystem is a shared responsibility. All stakeholders in the payment value chain play a critical role in maintaining the safety of cardholder data, and it's critical that they do everything they can to prevent these events from happening. In order to minimize these events happening and their impact, it's important that stakeholders act quickly and proactively work together. Sustained monitoring is also key to achieving this. So what role do each of these stakeholders assume in the case of an ADC? Firstly, the cardholder. In the event of an ADC, the cardholder is the individual whose card has been used to potentially commit fraudulent activity. The cardholder may report such fraudulent activity to their issuing bank. The issuer. The issuer identifies that a card may have been used fraudulently due to cardholder complaints and chargebacks. Card schemes. The card schemes monitor the payment ecosystem, oversee ADC cases, and work together with key players to protect the ecosystem. Acquirer. The acquirer works closely with the merchant throughout the event of an ADC, providing support and guidance during the investigation and updating the card schemes accordingly. Merchant. The merchant needs to take all necessary steps to investigate and contain the compromise. They will work closely with the acquirer and PFI investigator throughout the process. PFI investigator. If it is suspected that cardholder data is at risk, the merchant may have to engage a PCI forensic investigator. PCI forensic investigators are qualified by the Council's program. Their role is to investigate the event and how it may have occurred, as well as document what happened. And lastly, service providers. Third parties that offer technical support, processing services, e-commerce hosting services, or have any access to the cardholder data environment may also be requested to participate in the investigation and provide documents or artifacts to the PFI. By evaluating the role of each of these stakeholders, the interdependency becomes more and more evident. This further emphasizes the need to act quickly and proactively work together. So how to prevent or minimize the impact of an ADC event? As an acquirer, we see that having a PCI program in place significantly helps to reduce the likelihood of an ADC event taking place. However, merchants need to ensure that validating their PCI DSS is not seen as a ticking the checkbox exercise once a year. In order for such a program to be successful, PCI DSS needs to be promoted as a continuous process, being reinforced at all times. As part of your PCI DSS program, a well-developed and maintained incident response plan is key. An incident response plan enables decisive action and continued operation in response to an ADC event. It is crucial that everyone is fully aware of such an incident response plan and what their responsibilities may be. Lastly, as cyber criminals evolve their attack vectors and continuously target different industries for different reasons, it's key to stay up to date. Sorry. Okay. How to prevent, sorry. How to prevent and or minimize the impact of an ADC event. As an acquirer, we see that having a PCI program in place significantly helps to reduce the likelihood of an ADC event taking place. However, merchants need to ensure that validating their PCI DSS is not seen as a ticking the checkbox exercise once a year. In order for such a program to be successful, PCI DSS needs to be promoted as a continuous process, being reinforced at all times. As part of your PCI DSS program, a well-deserved and maintained incident response plan is key. An incident response plan enables decisive action and continued operation in response to an ADC event. It is crucial that everyone is fully aware of such an incident response plan and what their responsibilities may be. Lastly, as cyber criminals evolve their attack vectors and continuously target different industries for different reasons, it's key to stay up to date with industry threats. Now, let's say in the worst case scenario, there is a suspected or confirmed ADC event. We will now take you through the various different stages of such an ADC event. A notification for a potential ADC can come from various different sources, which I will now take you through. Firstly, the merchant. So the merchant or their hosting provider have notified a potential breach and reach out as this is an official requirement. The security team, our internal security team, sees unusual behavior on the checkout page of our merchants. Issuer, this is in the form of a common point of purchase. Card schemes, common point of purchase reports, threat intelligence, for instance, open source intelligence, social media intelligence, human intelligence, technical intelligence, or intelligence from the deep dark web. And lastly, notification by adverse media or news sources. A news article stating that a merchant experienced a data or security breach or a ransomware attack is, for example, a case with adverse media. For those of you unfamiliar with a CPP, a common point of purchase is defined as a single common identifier, a merchant location, processor or agent, institution where a legitimate card transaction occurred on the affected account prior to fraudulent activity. The card has been legitimately used at the merchant identifier and then fraudulently used afterwards. When you see this happen with multiple transactions, usage can be traced to one common point and subsequently generate a CPP report. Multiple cards being used at the same location reporting fraudulent activity is a strong indicator of an ADC event. The notification. So, the notification should be discussed with the merchant with the aim of gaining further understanding of the content and validity of the notification. Additional information is requested from the merchant in the form of an incident report. The incident report will help evaluate what has happened and whether that constitutes a potential ADC event. When the situation is deemed a potential ADC event, the merchant must implement the recommended containment steps. These include, but are not limited to, evidence preservation, do not access, modify, or shut down compromised systems, only isolate them, and to maintain control and document all action taken. The acquirer will subsequently notify the payment schemes and will continue to update the payment schemes throughout the investigation. The PFI investigation. When the situation is deemed a potential ADC, the merchant may need to engage a PCI forensic investigator to perform a forensic investigation. The PFI will validate that the incident has been contained and investigate if there is evidence or risk of a compromise. They will then document this accordingly, as this needs to be submitted to the card brand schemes. The investigation will depend on the size of the potential breach, such as the size of the organization and number of accounts at risk. The PFI will provide various deliverables which are shared with the schemes along the way. The PFI letter of engagement, preliminary incidents response report, and the final PFI report. For entities who have suffered a confirmed account compromise event, they will need to revalidate their PCI DSS compliance after the forensic investigation is complete. They may need to remediate certain PCI controls that were not in place during the time of the compromise as identified by the PFI. PCI controls need to be addressed with special attention in order to help avoid a repeat event. The case closure. Unfortunately, confirmed ADC events may come with hefty costs for the merchant. These include, but are not limited to, the PFI costs, potential fines from the card brands, engaging a QSA to revalidate PCI DSS compliance, and potential loss in profit due to reputational damage. So what are some of the merchant challenges that they face during an ADC event? Firstly, understanding. Technical literacy varies greatly from merchant to merchant. From the technicality of a notification to the concept of understanding that this is an issue even though you don't see it hurting the business yet. Secondly, resources. A small, medium-sized merchant using an encrypted solution may not have extensive tech resources or developers. It presents a challenge when they have to contain the breach and maintain business operations all at the same time. And lastly, incident response plan. Most merchants have an incident response plan in place, but it has not yet been properly communicated to all stakeholders within the organization, meaning that it is not yet fully operational. Merchants lose time at this step, as this step still needs to take place prior to being able to investigate and respond to the event. So what are the important insights to take away with you today? Well, firstly, the most common cause of a breach is that PCI DSS requirements have not been met, which is confirmed by the PFI. This reinforces the need to have a PCI program in place and maintain it on a continuous basis. Incorrectly scoping the cardholder data environment. Merchants assuming that because they are using an encrypted solution that they are out of scope for PCI DSS. The rule of thumb is that if you are accepting credit card payments on your website, your app, or in your physical store, you have PCI responsibilities. Malicious actors are evolving their attack vectors, which means that the standard, PCI DSS, has to evolve in the same way to mitigate the increased risk. Transitioning to PCI DSS version 4.0 as soon as reasonably possible will be key to achieving this. And lastly, for most entities, it is the first and hopefully the last time they will have to experience an ADC event. Merchants value expertise, guidance, and support throughout the process. Having a dedicated team as an acquirer to provide the support goes a long way. Thank you for your attention.